When I think about the moments in my life, the moments that have mattered, it's easy to sort of default to these big milestone moments, these forks in the road that we feel were definitive in some way. And it's really easy to ignore the everyday small moments that may actually lead to the big moments. This idea that our life is the sum of our habits, our daily actions, our behaviors, all adding up over time and producing the result. For instance, if we can imagine that what we eat every day, what we fill our minds with, what content we watch, who we speak with, who our community is, what conversations we have. We do those things enough time, we practice them over and over and over again, they become normal, they become even a daily habit, a ritual even, something we look forward to, something we design our lives around, and then it's probably of no surprise that we get all the pros and cons of those choices. So if our diet looks a certain way, or our exercise looks a certain way, or our relationship communication style looks a certain way, then over time we compound our behavior and we produce a result. And I don't think it's a surprise to people that what they do every day in the smallest of ways adds up over time. And yet somehow we still get surprised by the results we produce. We don't understand it. We sometimes think that these small little moments don't really matter. In fact, they're invisible. There are so many moments that I would notice that come up in my own life, but also those that I help. An off-the-cuff remark, seemingly unimportant detail that actually reveals something much bigger, something much deeper, something maybe much more insidious about my own psychology or theirs. Something that is attached to a deeply held belief about who we are, who others are, the way life is and the way life isn't. And those beliefs and those choices often reflect a part of ourselves that we struggle to be with. If I think about my day and I think about the moments, that's all we have. Every moment is the moment. Being present means being in the moment. It means there is no past, there is no future, there's just the moment. And how we choose to respond to the moment ultimately governs the future we create and the past we create. And yet I just don't think there's a lot of consciousness around that. I think part of the work around presence is to be conscious in the moment, to recognize what we're actually feeling, what we're actually thinking, what we're actually choosing, what we're avoiding, what we're being honest about, what we're hiding and pretending and lying about. So when we normalize lying, when we normalize reframing, when we normalize downplaying, when we just make it part of our daily habit to diminish ourselves or what we want or need, or to deprioritize these things and reframe it and buy ourselves off with some form of excuse, we get really good at it. We may even then encourage other people to do it. I'd even go so far to say that we would get angry when someone doesn't do that, because what they remind us of and demonstrate to us is the person who doesn't do that. So for instance, if we've lied to ourselves about our health and then we see someone else who doesn't do that, we might feel threatened by them because their honesty threatens us. It threatens our lack of honesty. After all, it's way easier to spend time around a group of people who are all sort of got a mutually assured destruction, where it's like, if you validate my lie, I'll validate yours, and then neither of us will have to face the truth. But that's very, very upsetting and disruptive when one of those people is willing to do so. And I've seen this for myself, experienced it for myself, that when maybe you're in a group of friends and someone changes, someone chooses to face something about themselves that they want to change, and the group isn't ready for that, it's always interesting to see how the group might respond, whether that's a family, whether that's a friendship group or colleagues, how there can be ridicule or mocking or alienation. And a big part of that shift is because what this person might actually be revealing in each of us is the extent and the depth of our own self-deception, where we gave up on our own dreams, where we lied and betrayed ourselves. We bought ourselves off with some sort of idea or lie or reframe to justify our behavior. The daily practice of anything, of what we put in our minds, in our bodies, in our hearts, in our space, if you want to change your life, just look at what you do every day. Those small actions, those small choices, those small reactions, those small ways of jumping to conclusions or making assumptions or thinking about things or deciding things, the way we make choices, you do that enough time over a couple of decades and you can pretty much paint a picture of how that person's life's going to go. And at the same time, people get very upset if you were to try to predict their life like that. It's kind of funny, when we think about, we don't want our lives to be predictable, and yet we want them to be predictable. We hate when people discover who we really are. At the same time, we're all trying to create certainty. We're trying to create an illusion. What we're really upset about is you don't see me in the way that I've tried so hard to be seen. I think it's in our nature to see through deception. It's a survival tactic. Part of life and camouflage and animals is to use camouflage to not only protect yourself, but to also be a predator. All of us are wired to seek and detect camouflage, to look for it. That's why a lot of the times we can see the deception in other people long before they can see it in themselves. So much so that when that person finally realizes or finally admits their self-deception, no one's surprised. If I think about some people in my life, people I love dearly, myself included, who, in my judgment, have spent a large proportion of their life trying to maintain a lie that everyone else can see through, fooling no one but themselves, believing that if they say it loud enough or enough times that suddenly it'll make it true, or everyone will finally believe them, and it just doesn't work that way. People then start to pity that person, or they start to avoid them. Maybe they get angry with them. Maybe they try to fix them, save them. I've certainly tried, and I know people have done that with me. And at some point, there's a decision that's made, which is, does this person want to tell the truth? And at the same time, holding enough compassion to understand that maybe the weight of the truth is just unbearable to this person. The weight and enormity of facing that truth feels like death. And so they choose how they wish to spend their life and their life force and their energy on this very limited time on this spinning rock. They're willing to accept the consequences of living a lie. And at some point, it's not up to us. Maybe they're the teacher, they're the loving reminder to all of us of what it looks like when you choose to live in incredibly deep self-deception. Like anything, if you think about your house, the stuff that you own, the stuff that you've owned for a long time or you've got a deep emotional attachment to is really hard to give up. If it got broken or lost or stolen, it would be very upsetting. The stuff you have less of an emotional attachment to, that doesn't upset you as much. You might feel violated or you might feel frustrated, but the grief isn't as deep. If you can think that about your stuff, about your car, about shoes or a TV or a PlayStation, then what does that say about you? What about your stuff? What about your memories and your experiences and your beliefs? Those things we guard with our life. And when those things feel trampled on or challenged or provoked or pushed, that's enough to go to war over. That's a hill that we're willing to die on. And the question is why? And what if in those provocations, we're being made aware of something? I remember years ago, there was a big flood in Australia and a lot of people lost their things. Their houses were over the roof with water and mud, and as a result, everything inside had to go in the bin. I was part of the volunteer cleanup crew, and from house to house, we'd go there with our generators and our tools, and we basically just ripped people's houses apart. I mean, we ripped their lives apart and put it on the gutter for it to be collected. And I watched people through all these varying stages of grief, people who just renovated their homes, people who had a lifetime of memories, people who had nowhere else to go, and their life washed away that day. And they were lost. And yet in those same group of people, there was uncannily a number of people who, it's not that they weren't bothered by it. You could see that their entire life wasn't about this. They had their health, they had their family, they had their friends, they had their future. And their attitude was, we can rebuild this and we can make new memories. And there is these other things that we can work toward outside of this stuff. And so their happiness and their identity wasn't all wrapped up in materials like that. But I remember this one character in particular was really interesting to me. She was grateful. I would never forget it. She was actually quite elated that everything got washed away. And this wasn't because of the insurance payout. This was because she felt stuck. And she told me, I felt stuck here for the longest time, and now suddenly I have nothing here to keep me here. I feel free. I feel no longer burdened by all the stuff that I couldn't throw out, I couldn't part with, I couldn't deal with. It was just overwhelming. And it was such a beautiful reminder in that moment that these events happen to us. These moments happen. And who we are in the moment changes everything. There were some people who their life was over. That Tuesday or whatever day it was the end of their life. And yet for another woman, it was the beginning of a new one. And it's in that reminder that life's going to happen. There are these moments. Life is always happening. The moment is always meeting us. But the question is, who are we when the moment meets us? Are we ready? Are we prepared? Or are we closed? Are we resistant? Are we scared? Are we judgmental? Are we rigid? There's just endless opportunity, endless possibility, endless adventure awaiting all of us. The question is when did you give up on yours? When did you give up on the future? When did you give up on hope? When did you give up on change? When did you give up on other people? This idea is with kids, when we fall down and we're told to get back up, dust yourself off, try again, try again. Part of that resilience, part of trying to teach us to feel your feelings and have a cry. And yes, that was scary. And yes, you got hurt, but try again, is to remind us that part of living is to get hurt, and it is to heal, and it is to fall down, and it is to get back up. But this world that we're creating where we should never fall down and we should never fail and we should never get hurt and we should never get scared. And if we do, then obviously something's gone wrong. I think we're doing ourselves an incredible disservice. And I think what happens is people want these amazing moments in their life, and life keeps offering them to them, but they can't see them. And when the moment meets them, they're not there to meet it. They're too busy hiding, asleep, avoiding, denying, pretending, judging, resisting, with clever frameworks, with big language, with labels and titles and identities and costumes and whatever it is that people need to hide in so that they don't maybe have to face the enormity of the moment that they don't feel like they can meet. But if you think about our self-esteem, you think about our confidence, you think about what it means to be empowered. There's so much stuff out there where people are talking about being empowered. Well, what does that mean? A controversial idea in all of this that I mull over is the idea of having no boundaries, having no conditions. And in the journey of healing, let's just say you get hurt and you need a Band-Aid, you need pain meds, you need a hospital, you need stitches. Fine. In an emotional hurt, in a psychological hurt, you need boundaries. These are a very, very useful tool, very useful medication, a very useful treatment to help you recover, to restore your health and get you back to a place now where you can go effectively, go risk getting hurt again. The point of getting better is so that you can go and risk getting hurt again. And maybe next time you won't get hurt as badly, or you get hurt in a different way because, you'll try something else. But that desire and need to take risks is part of what it means to be alive. So what happens when that medication becomes a lifestyle? We stop healing, and now we just use it as a treatment plan for the rest of our life to not feel, to not get scared, to not face uncertainty and risk. If you think about the conditions of love, why do we have the conditions in there? It was to protect us from something, protect us from pain. But the question is, are we learning to heal? Are we learning to navigate that pain or the threat of that pain differently? Or are we just learning to shut ourselves off from the risk of ever being hurt in the first place? And I get it. We live in a world where we think that's the goal. That's the dream life, to never be uncomfortable, never feel challenged, never get bored, never get hurt. And yet then we turn around and say, why is everyone lonely and depressed? Why is everyone passionless and dead in the eyes? Is it because we've actually sterilized ourselves and we've removed the very thing that makes us feel alive, which is uncertainty, to leap, to try, to fuck around and find out? So an idea of moving beyond boundaries, have a life of no boundaries, isn't because we don't love ourselves and because we become a doormat. Having no boundaries means because we trust ourselves when the moment meets us. We can meet the moment. Life throws us a challenge. We're ready. We're capable. We know what to do. We trust ourselves. We'll be okay. And if we're not okay, then it doesn't matter. When I socialize that concept, it's interesting to notice the difference in how people respond. And a lot of people do get very upset about this idea of having no boundaries. But what they fail to recognize is there's a life beyond boundaries. There's a life after hospital. There's a life after medication. There's a life after the pain meds. But if you've decided somewhere along the way that now this is a wonderful tool and an aid that you can become dependent on for the rest of your life, so you never have to feel something in yourself, your own inadequacy, your own insecurity, your own incompetence. And then you experience the pain of loneliness and unrealized dreams and all the places that you wanted to go and people you wanted to meet, but you can't now because of X, Y, Z. When are you ready and willing to accept that maybe the choice that you've made to lean so heavily on these labels, to lean so heavily on an identity, to lean so heavily on stuff, to lean so heavily on a tool to effectively shape your life? As you meet these moments, you will discover where you're incompetent. One of the things that I see a lot of is this strange thing in the therapy world where we don't want to scare people with themselves. We don't want to say, you did this and maybe you are to blame. Maybe it is your fault. No, it's never your fault. You're not to blame. Sometimes we are at fault. Sometimes we are to blame. That coddling, that cotton wooling of people believing that they can't survive their own emotions. Granted, like I said, some of these techniques are useful if someone's really at a point. Imagine a car crash victim. That's not probably the time and a place to speak about the virtues of opiate addiction. In that moment, that person's deeply wounded and they need help. But 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, what is their healing journey look like? And I guess the bigger question is without opening Pandora's box on things like chronic pain, now what? In any picture, there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be situations where in a room full of 100 people, there's always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 that do not fit the mean. I'm not making a case for those extremes, but I'm making a case for the mean, where the average person, with the majority of people, find themselves in a moment they can't cope with. And rather than being able to tell the truth about that, they're quick to blame. They're quick to externalize. They're quick to look for something to feel better, whether that's some form of addictive behavior or a substance or a conversation or an avoidance strategy. And then they don't recognize that when they practice that every day, they get really, really good at it. And in doing so, it hurts them the most. I'll give you one last example. If you get really, really good at not speaking up, maybe you believe that it's not worth it or that there's no point or no one's going to listen to you anyway. Every time you don't speak up, A, that group of people or that situation doesn't benefit from your voice. But B, you actually reinforce to yourself. It's through no one else's actions. It's through your own that you reinforce to yourself that your voice doesn't actually have any power, that it doesn't actually matter, that you are right, that you should shut up and sit down and go away and die and be quiet and nobody cares about what you have to say. No one's actually saying that. but you are saying it the loudest to you through your behavior. Now, you might buy yourself off and you might reframe it as I'm just protecting my peace, or I'm not interested, or there's no point, or there's not my battle to fight. And I'm not saying that you need to get involved in every skirmish, but it's very important to understand, are you actually telling the truth in that moment? Or are you saying this other thing where, not my circus, not my monkey, or not my job, or whatever, not because you don't want to say something or you could say something, but you actually don't believe you can, and you don't believe you should, and you don't believe that it's going to matter anyway. Because it's in that unspoken whole truth that you actually reinforce something about you to you, and that becomes your daily practice. And if you do that for 10, 20, 30 years, and you wake up one day and you go, no one listens to me, there's no point, and I'm just going to sit here and be quiet and I'm just going to watch people do things and no one cares anyway, you'll be right. And that's the life you'll create. And the question is that the life you want to create? Because maybe you do have ideas. And I get it. Maybe not everyone wants to hear them. Maybe not everybody cares for them. Maybe not everyone wants to believe you. But the choice to no longer share them, to shrink yourself, to hide yourself, and then call it like, oh, it's not important or it doesn't matter, that is all you. That is you choosing to take that experience, to take that moment and all the subsequent moments around it that are like that, and polish that approach, to polish that reaction, to refine your ability to justify ways to yourself that your voice doesn't have any power. And then you get upset that no one listens to you, and you get upset that you're lonely, and you get upset that you could have been more, you could have done more, but no one paid attention. But the question here is, when will you pay attention? And when will you stop lying? When will you stop pretending that things don't matter? So this conversation that I want to keep having over and over again, these moments are everywhere, constantly. The great news about it is you have a new opportunity right now to practice who you want to be. You don't have to go back to what you just did 5 seconds ago, 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago. You get to choose right now, right now, right now, right now. So what will you choose? Will you choose to tell the truth? Will you choose something else? Or will you choose to do what you've always done and find more elaborate and clever ways to justify, to manage and numb the pain, so that you don't actually have to face the reason you're in pain in the first place? What if every day when the moment meets you and you meet the moment, that intersection, that collision course, what if just once a day you chose something else? You chose what you wouldn't normally choose. Maybe that moment is at the kitchen fridge. Maybe that moment is when your partner comes home from work. Maybe that moment is, when the boss walks in angry, or your child comes in and they've gone and done something that you told them not to do. There's a moment. There's a moment for you to practice something else. And it's in that moment when we choose something else that we start to begin a very, very small series of actions. This is like tiny habits kind of stuff, where we start to change our trajectory and we change our response and we change what we start to normalize and what we start to practice in our mind as a possible choice in a situation like that. And we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. And then there's a week and a month and a few months go by. And before you know it, you've lost weight. Your relationship's improved. Certain situations don't bother you as much anymore. But remember, and here's the insidious part, if you are still lying while presenting the truth, as in, I don't care about this thing, when you really do care about the thing, then you'll also expand that. You'll expand that feeling of working over the top. Look, there's layers to it. And the deepest layer that you can tell when the whole truth is about your own not enoughness. It's about where you believe and feel that you won't survive the moment. And so as a result, it's better to lie about it. It's better to hide, pretend, deflect, avoid, do whatever, something like that, just so that you don't have to tell the truth in the moment that I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to do what's needed here, or to be who you want me to be, or to get this thing right. And whether that's a parent who's afraid of being a bad parent, or an employee who's exposed of not knowing how to do their job, or being exposed to ourselves as someone who doesn't actually keep our word. I'm going to lose weight this year as you eat another Snickers bar. Whatever it might be, it's in that really uncomfortable moment where we meet the moment and the moment meets us, and we realize that our pants are down and we are not prepared, we are unskilled, we do not have what it takes. And it's in that moment that I encourage you to stay, to tell the truth, no matter what it costs. And I get it. Most people will tell me I'm crazy and they won't do it. And so they'll continue to create a life of deception, deceiving themselves, deceiving other people, being deceived, and then being upset about it. But if in those moments you are able to tell the whole truth, that's where I'm at right now. That's what I'm stuck on right now. That's where I'm at. That then becomes a very powerful platform from which to actually start practicing something else. So I encourage you, one moment, you've got a bajillion moments in a day. Just choose one of them and notice in that moment what shows up for you, the judgment, the feelings, the defensiveness, the automatic response that you've trained yourself for many, many years to do. And can you stop long enough? Can you just observe that moment long enough and not actually just do what you've always done? React, get angry, judge, make a comment, roll your eyes. Can you just stop and observe yourself in that moment, observe the moment, observe them, observe the feelings, observe the thoughts, and do nothing with them? Can you in that moment then feel the feelings of what's actually there? Feel the discomfort, feel the tension, feel the frustration. Can you tell the truth about that feeling? Wow, in this moment, I feel really upset by this. And I'm upset by it because the part of me that wants to be listened to feels unlistened to. And then what do you want to choose? Do you want to react? Do you want to say, I told you so? Do you want to punish them? Do you want to give them the silent treatment? And this choice is up to you. But it's in that choice that you start to accept and understand that in every single moment, the choice that you make is not free from consequence. And the choice you make and the consequence that ensues is going to shape the path you walk, the path you create, the outcomes you create. This weird distortion we have in society that it's sort of like there's a bunch of stuff and then outcome. It doesn't work like that. The love of your life, that wealth creation, that strong body comes from that small daily habit, the daily ritual, the moment-to-moment practice of recognizing who we are when it matters most. That when we meet the moment and the moment meets us, what do we choose? That's the work that we're about. That's the work I'm about. That's the community that I want to create, that I am creating. A community of people that are able to create a bit of time and space around these moments, to slow down time, to not always do what we've always done, so that we can actually create something different and be empowered by it. So that becomes who we are, rather than always being who we've always been and feeling frustrated by the past always showing up in the future.